In April of 2022, Tatiana Pino filed for divorce from her husband, Miami real estate mogul Sergio Pino. After she discovered that he'd been trying to kill her for years, the woman had experienced bouts of severe breathing problems and other complications that led to her being intubated multiple times. Staff at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore eventually found the presence of fentanyl in her system. Tatiana suspected that Sergio had secretly been poisoning her with the deadly opioid. The man had founded the Century Home Builders Group and grew the business into the largest Hispanic-owned home builder in the US. He and Tatiana had been married for over 30 years, and she believed that he had a financial motive for wanting her dead. After Tatiana filed for divorce, more attacks followed, and they were suspected to have been financially backed by Sergio. He'd allegedly placed a $300,000 contract on his estranged wife's head. Following an FBI-led investigation, at least 9 suspects were indicted in connection to the conspiracy. Sergio had allegedly hired some of them through 33-year-old Bayron Bennett, a part-time worker on his yacht. One of the accused, 27-year-old Edna Etienne, was accused of intentionally crashing a rented Home Depot flatbed truck into Tatiana's vehicle as she pulled into her Pinecrest home in August of 2023. Tatiana survived the collision. In another incident, a crew hired by Sergio carried out an arson attack on 3 vehicles belonging to Tatiana's sister. The suspects were reportedly instructed at some point to inject Tatiana with a fatal substance and make it look like a heart attack. On June the 23rd of 2024, the Pino's daughter, Alessandra, called 911 to report that a masked gunman had threatened her and Tatiana. The latter had managed to escape by driving her car into her backyard and then activated her horn to warn Alessandra when she went outside to check on the commotion. The gunman, who'd later be identified as 53-year-old Vernon Green, held a pistol aimed only inches from Alessandra's face before fleeing. Even though Sergio was at the center of the investigation, he wasn't officially charged. In mid-July of 2024, a SWAT team went to his multi-million-dollar home located in a gated Coral Gables community to pick up electronics and documents connected to the case. The officers found the 67-year-old dead from a gunshot wound in an upstairs bedroom. Evidence indicated that days prior, he'd been trying to get his affairs in order and transfer control of his business to his brother. In a final note he'd sent to employees, Sergio described Bennett as a criminal and blamed him for the attacks on Tatiana. The case was ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 8. Eli Weaver. On June the 2nd of 2009, Barbara Weaver was found dead from a gunshot wound at her home in Apple Creek, Ohio. An intruder had broken into the residence and shot the woman in the chest, piercing her heart. Barbara's husband, 29-year-old Eli, was out fishing with friends at the time. In spite of his alibi, he would be arrested and charged in connection to his wife's murder. The couple belonged to an Amish community and had 5 children together. In the past, Eli had left his family multiple times but returned and was forgiven. By multiple accounts, he was abusive towards Barbara, cared little for their children, and had a number of affairs. On a virtual gaming side, Eli created an online profile called Amish Stud, the description of which read, "Who wants to do an Amish guy?" He used it and other profiles to connect with women. Barbara at one point wrote to a marriage counselor, "Where did my friend, love, trustworthy husband go to? He hates me to the core." Eli was determined to end the relationship. The Amish community would have embraced him in case of his wife's death, but he would have been shunned had he chosen to divorce her. Eli eventually began having an affair with 39-year-old Barb Raber, a married mother of 3 who was raised Amish. Raber was at the time working as a taxi lady, driving members of the community to places where a horse and buggy couldn't take them. Eli manipulated Raber into killing his wife. Their communications revealed that they'd explored options for Barbara's execution, including shooting, poisoning, or a house explosion. Eli showed a complete disregard for the lives of his children when considering the latter variant, writing, "The kids will go to heaven because they're innocent." Barbara's murder was quickly linked to the adulterous couple, and they were arrested. On June the 10th of 2009, Raber admitted to taking one of her husband's guns, loading it up and sneaking into the Weaver's home, but claimed she'd only meant to scare Barbara and not actually go through with the killing. She was found guilty of aggravated murder and sentenced to 23 years to life. Eli admitted complicity to commit murder in a deal that saw him being handed a term of 15 years to life. Number 7. Brendan Vozella. Mother-to-be Brianna Welsh called 911 in late July of 2024 to report that her boyfriend, Brendan Vozella, had punched her in the stomach. At the time of the incident, 25-year-old Brianna was 3 months pregnant and living with Brendan in Lynn, Massachusetts. The couple had also taken in the latter's brother, Zachary, who'd previously been living on the street. In the aftermath of the domestic violence incident, Brendan was arrested and held at a local police station while Brianna was treated at the hospital. A taxi then dropped her off at the apartment they shared at around 6:10 p.m. on July the 30th. The next day, Brianna's mother called maintenance and asked them to perform a welfare check after she hadn't heard from her daughter. The building's administrators found the young woman dead with stab wounds to her neck, legs, and abdominal area. Key fob data indicated that Brianna had accessed the apartment at around 6:15 p.m. on the evening she was last seen. Given the fact that he'd recently assaulted her, Brendan would have been the primary suspect in her murder, but he was still in police custody when Brianna arrived at home. Zachary was questioned by law enforcement and told them that he'd been at a Dunkin' Donuts all day. Investigators proved that he was lying, at which point the 26-year-old changed his story to say that he'd returned to Brianna and Brendan's apartment and stayed there from 2 to 8:30 p.m. He claimed that he hadn't seen the victim during that time, which was demonstrably untrue. Brianna's key fob was found in a backpack at a relative's home, where Zachary was also staying. In the backpack, which Zachary had been caught on CCTV dropping off, there were clothes and a knife that tested positive for blood. The authorities believed there was growing tension in the home shared by the brothers and Brianna, stemming from the fact that she wanted Zachary to move out. It was unclear if Brendan's attack on her was sparked by that conflict. He was charged with assault and battery on a pregnant victim and assault and battery on a family member. On August the 1st of 2024, Zachary pleaded not guilty to 1 count of murder and 1 count of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. He was deemed a danger to the community and held without bail, pending a probable cause hearing scheduled for September the 10th of 2024. Number 6. Marsha Allen. In December of 2022, Indiana man Herb Allen, aged 52, died suddenly at the home he shared with his wife Marsha. It was initially believed that the man had passed away from natural causes. Marsha continued to live at the address, and in the fall of 2023 her home was burglarized. 2 men, Stephen White and Nathaniel Kane Napier, were arrested in connection to the incident. Jackson County Sheriff's Department detectives learned that they'd carried out the burglary at the direction and with the assistance of Marsha's daughter, Ashley Jones. During questioning, one of the men claimed that Ashley had told him that Marsha had killed her husband. Detectives examined phone conversations between the 2 women in which they discussed poisoning Herb. The duo initially bought foxglove seeds and water hemlock. In November of 2022, Herb went to the hospital twice. He complained of numbness to his face and on the second visit of vomiting, fever and chills, which were all symptoms of foxglove poisoning. At some point in December, Marsha and Jones put hemlock in his chili and in a margarita. In a message to her daughter, Marsha expressed frustration with how slow the process was unfolding, writing, "I need this to be over. I wish it would reach its climax and be done. LOL." On December the 13th, Ashley ordered a gallon of ethylene glycol, a liquid substance used to make antifreeze and de-icing solutions. The substance, which is deadly for human consumption, arrived at the home on the 19th. Marsha then used it to lace a root beer float, which he gave to Herb. The following day, the man died. It would emerge that the mother-daughter duo had conspired to kill him in order to gain access to his retirement money and savings. In July of 2023, Ashley sent a message to White writing, "I planned it all." In reference to her mother, the woman said, "She couldn't get into a dead man's phone without me." Marsha and Ashley became the focus of the investigation after the burglar spoke to the authorities and the murder plot was uncovered. On October the 16th of 2023, the day after she was questioned in connection to Herb's murder, Marsha was found dead, and there was no indication that someone else had killed her. A few days later, Ashley was arrested and charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and burglary. She denied the charges, and her trial was set to commence in January of 2025. Number 5. Catherine Powell. In December of 2012, English couple Katherine and Stephen Poxon separated but then rekindled their relationship in the spring of the following year. Shortly thereafter, Katherine began having an affair with 44-year-old Stephen Swallow. Her marriage with Stephen once again broke down after he discovered that she was being unfaithful, and he threatened to take full custody of their son. Katherine consequently told Swallow that she wanted her husband dead, and he agreed to help. The woman, who was at the time in her early 20s, sent Swallow a message that read, "I hope you kill Stu, babe. Then we can be happy," and a subsequent text urging him to get the job done. In December of 2013, a neighbor saw Swallow mouthing off and drinking beer outside the Poxon family home. He then pulled out 2 knives and told the neighbor, "I'm off to go and stab him," referring to Stephen. Swallow, who was described as a vulnerable man with psychiatric problems, was talked down by the neighbor and didn't go through with the murder. He and Katherine were subsequently arrested. They pleaded guilty to conspiring together to unlawfully cause grievous bodily harm. A judge, who deemed that the murder plot lacked guile and sophistication, jailed Katherine for 27 months and Swallow for 3 years, in spite of his wife conspiring to kill him. Stephen forgave her and attended her sentencing hearing. He stated an intention of waiting for Katherine to serve her sentence and then resuming the relationship. Number 4. Kazbek Bishbayv. In November of 2023, the former National Economy Minister of Kazakhstan was captured on surveillance cameras brutally beating his wife at the Bao restaurant in the capital city of Astana. 43-year-old Kazbek Bishbayv relentlessly punched, kicked, strangled and stomped 31-year-old Sultanat Nukenova. The man continued to land devastating strikes on his defenseless wife after she'd collapsed to the floor and as she desperately tried to crawl away from him. The beatdown reportedly went on for multiple hours, and since the restaurant was owned by a relative of the former minister, no one intervened. Bishbayv was at one point caught on CCTV dragging his half-naked wife by the hair into a room at the venue. Nukenova succumbed to massive brain trauma and her body was found in a VIP cabin at the restaurant the following morning. Bishbayv, who in the past had served 3 years in prison for bribery, was arrested and charged with murder committed with particular cruelty and torture. The ensuing legal proceedings were dubbed the trial of the century by local media. It became the first trial to be streamed online in the history of Kazakhstan, and tens of thousands of outraged citizens demanded tougher laws against domestic violence. During the legal proceedings, the court was told that Bishbayv calmly sat down for a meal after beating his wife to death and, instead of calling an ambulance, phoned a clairvoyant friend. It emerged that Nukenova had tried to leave her husband multiple times in the past after being subjected to repeated beatings. An undated photo presented in court showed the woman bearing 2 black eyes. Bishbayv admitted to beating his wife at Bao, but he pleaded guilty to negligent homicide. He claimed that Nukenova had suffered some of the more serious injuries after they'd struggled in a bathroom and she pulled away, falling and hitting her head on a wall and then on the toilet. His version of events was considered to lack substance, and the man was ultimately convicted of murder and torture, resulting in a prison sentence of 24 years. Kazakhstan had decriminalized domestic violence in 2017, making it only a finable offense. Nukenova's murder refocused the country's attention on the pervasive issue, and in April of 2024, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev signed amendments that harshened penalties for domestic abuse. The bill was reportedly dubbed Sultanat's Law. Number 3. Dallas Michels. In the summer of 2020, Arizona woman Teresa Michels was preparing to go on a family trip to California with her husband and their 3 children. When 6 police officers showed up to her home, Teresa was shocked upon learning that her husband, Dallas, had been planning to fatally poison her with fentanyl. The family was experiencing intense financial pressure stemming from leases on 4 cars, a nanny for their children, and a failed business venture that involved Dallas signing a 5-year lease for a martial arts studio. Teresa would later state, "Dallas and I didn't have the perfect marriage, but I had no idea he wanted me dead." His plan was to collect her $500,000 life insurance policy and then start a new life with his mistress. Dallas had been dating the other woman, whose identity wasn't revealed, for 8 months, and they'd recently gotten engaged. Detectives presented Teresa with evidence of the plot, including her husband's fake Facebook accounts, and they also showed her the mistress's profile. Teresa subsequently contacted the woman on the social media platform, and she apologized profusely, stating she had no idea of Dallas's nefarious plans. To her, Teresa had reportedly been described by the man as a drug addict who'd abused their children. The mistress believed Dallas to be a caring single father. Days before the family was due to leave on vacation, Dallas contacted a dealer in order to purchase the fentanyl and told them that he was planning to do it, meaning kill Teresa during the trip. The dealer informed the police and subsequently recorded an incriminating call with Dallas. The latter had also told his mother, who lived with him and Teresa, about the plot. In messages they exchanged, the woman asked what he was going to buy her, to which Dallas replied, "Haha, with the 500,000 a nice Hawaiian vacation. Ain't going to Hawaii until the deed is done." The mother wasn't charged in connection to the plot, but Teresa kicked her out and obtained an emergency restraining order against her. Dallas was arrested, and in June of 2021 he was jailed for 6 years for attempted aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Today's topic was requested by Michelle Roxy 21 and Bettina Mitchell 3535. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Colleen Campbell. As he was returning to his residence in Mossley, Greater Manchester, England, on July the 2nd of 2022, Thomas Campbell was ambushed by 3 thugs. He was forced into his home where he was subjected to roughly 2 hours of torment. Thomas suffered 61 separate injuries consistent with being stabbed, strangled, scolded, stomped, and kicked. His lifeless body was discovered the following day. An investigation would reveal that his ex-wife, mother of 4, Colleen, had conspired with his attackers. She gave his location to John Belfield, the alleged mastermind of the killing, who was reportedly angry that Thomas was dating his former partner. He was also financially motivated. During their marriage, Thomas and Colleen engaged in criminal activity, and in 2019 they both pleaded guilty to money laundering at Manchester Crown Court. Thomas was jailed for 2 years while his wife was handed a 16-month sentence, suspended for 2 years. Belfield started plotting to kill and rob Thomas after he'd read about his money laundering conviction, which detailed his and Colleen's lavish lifestyle. Following the breakdown of her marriage, Colleen was believed to have formed an alliance with Belfield against Thomas. She was recorded on her home surveillance cameras, talking to the former on the phone hours before the murder. Cell site data, CCTV footage, and circumstantial evidence were used to track down those involved in the attack. Colleen went on trial with 2 other men, Reese Stephen and Stephen Clewart, aged 29 and 38 respectively. Colleen feigned ignorance during the trial, claiming that she'd offered the information to Belfield to help him discover whether his ex-girlfriend was seeing Thomas. She was cleared of murder and found guilty of manslaughter with conspiracy to rob, resulting in a sentence of 13 years behind bars. Cleworth, who had taken part in the planning but not the actual attack, was convicted on the same charge and given life with a minimum of 12 years served. Stephen was found guilty of murder with conspiracy to rob. He was jailed for life with a minimum of 37 years. As the investigation unfolded, Belfield fled to South America, and in the spring of 2023 he was arrested for drug-related offences in Suriname. After it emerged that he was a wanted man, he was sent back to England. In March of 2024, he was charged with murder, conspiracy to murder and manslaughter. In July of 2024, the man appeared at Manchester Crown Court via video link and pleaded not guilty. His trial was set for June of 2025. Love can easily turn into heated relationships that may end tragically for both sides, but what happens when it turns into rivalry? Find out right after number 1. Because we've got our previous video of when love rivalries go wrong lined up for you. Number 1. Tatiana Remley. Throughout their tumultuous 12-year marriage, California couple Tatiana and Mark Remley broke up and rekindled their relationship multiple times. When filing for divorce in the summer of 2023, former model Tatiana recounted several instances of violence that included Mark chasing her with a knife, putting a gun to her head and firing a gun in their home during an argument. She also claimed to have been abused at gunpoint by a friend while Mark watched. The latter denied the charges. The couple were involved in the swinger lifestyle and were featured in a 2017 Showtime documentary series called Naked SNCTM. It wasn't clear what strain, if any, the lifestyle had placed on their relationship. Mark and Tatiana were featured in media reports in the past with the monumental failure of Valitar, a multi-million-dollar equestrian acrobatics show they'd tried to put together at the Del Mar Fairgrounds in San Diego. The venture abruptly shut down after only a few shows, and Mark subsequently filed for bankruptcy on his business entity, leaving acrobats, performers, and crew members without payment. In August of 2023, roughly 3 weeks after she'd filed for divorce, Tatiana would be arrested for trying to kill her husband. She'd initially offered a common friend with whom she'd been intimately involved in the past $2 million to carry out the hit. The friend revealed the plot to Mark, who consequently went to the police. A sting operation was put together, and an undercover officer posing as a hitman arranged to meet with Tatiana at a Solana Beach Starbucks on August the 2nd. Tatiana brought with her 3 firearms and money as a down payment. She gave the undercover detective detailed information on how he should kill Mark and dispose of his body. Tatiana was arrested on the spot. She initially maintained her innocence, but eventually admitted soliciting another to commit or join in the commission of a murder, in addition to carrying a loaded, concealed firearm that she did not lawfully own. In December of 2023, she was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months behind bars.
Number 9. Jennifer Maldonado. On May the 21st of 2020, California resident Jennifer Maldonado fatally stabbed Angela Betts, aged 25, at her Bakersfield apartment. At the time, Betts was with an unidentified man who'd also been in a romantic relationship with 21-year-old Maldonado when the attack occurred. The latter had grown jealous after discovering that her lover was accompanied by another woman, which led to her violent confrontation. During the ill-fated altercation, Maldonado reportedly grabbed a knife and stabbed Betts through one of her legs' femoral arteries. The victim began bleeding profusely and was rushed to the hospital in a desperate attempt to preserve her life, but the car crashed before their arrival. Betts subsequently died from hemorrhage shock. It would take 2 years for the police to release the victim's phone back to her family, at which time her sister, Serena Recalde, uploaded a video to TikTok in which she revealed Betts' final selfies, taken less than an hour before she was murdered. Recalde's viral video also detailed how Betts' call to 911 had lasted for over 3 minutes. In the incident's immediate aftermath, Maldonado fled the scene and managed to evade capture for 8 months before finally being apprehended. Family members of the victim were appalled when the prosecution offered Maldonado a plea deal, reducing her charges from first-degree murder to manslaughter. In spite of the protests and victims' impact testimonies, she was sentenced to just 8 years and 8 months behind bars on April the 28th of 2022. Number 8. Daniel Grogan. British man Daniel Grogan, along with 8 of his family members, carried out a violent attack on 18-year-old Jay Sewell in London, leading to the latter's death on December the 11th of 2018. 20-year-old Grogan convinced his parents, Robert and Anne, 57 and 54 respectively, along with his 22-year-old brother Peter, his 29-year-old sister Francesca, his 19-year-old cousin, and 2 friends to help him murder the young man who was his ex-partner's new boyfriend. Gemma Hodder had reportedly dated Grogan for 2 years, but informed the police that he'd become deranged after she decided to end their relationship. He allegedly locked her in a car and bit her on the forehead when she refused to give him her phone. In the days leading up to Sewell's murder, Grogan used a spare key to break into Hodder's apartment, violently attacking her before neighbors intervened on her behalf. Sewell and Hodder decided to meet with Grogan in an attempt to settle the matter, but were instead ambushed by the young man and his family. The couple, along with friend Charlie Pamphlet, tried to retreat back to their car but were unable to escape the assault, which involved the use of knives, baseball bats, and even a 4-foot-long firefighter axe. Hodder managed to drive the 2 injured men to the ER. Pamphlet made a full recovery while Sewell succumbed to his injuries a short time later. An autopsy conducted during the subsequent investigation revealed that the victim had been stabbed 2 times in the legs and once in the chest, piercing his aorta. Grogan and his family denied any involvement in the murder, but were ultimately tried and convicted. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 8 years for wounding Pamphlet, as well as violent disorder. 4 of his family members, including his parents, were found guilty of manslaughter and received sentences that ranged from 3 to 14 years behind bars, while the rest were only charged with violent disorder. Number 7. Makerkova. On April the 5th of 2014, 48-year-old British millionaire Andrew Bush was returning from a trip with his girlfriend Maria Korateva when he was fatally shot by his ex-partner Marika Kukakova in his Spanish mansion near Malaga. Bush had broken up with the 26-year-old swimsuit model 6 months earlier and had taken out a restraining order against her after she'd refused to accept the end of their relationship. Korateva, aged 23, discovered the former lover in Bush's bedroom, wearing pajamas, and ran outside to the car to alert her boyfriend. He instructed her to call the police, then went inside to speak with his ex. A few minutes later, Kukakova emerged from the mansion and told Korateva that Bush had given her permission to take the Hummer. Korateva, who hadn't been able to call the police due to her depleted phone battery, handed the keys over to her love rival, later testifying that she'd been too shocked to refuse. She rushed back into the house and discovered Bush's lifeless body. He'd reportedly been shot once in the shoulder and twice in the head. 4 days later, Kukakova, who'd fled the country in the aftermath, surrendered herself to the police in her home country of Slovakia. During the ensuing murder trial, she claimed to have been retrieving clothes she'd left behind when Bush and his new girlfriend arrived at the house. Kukakova assured the court that the gun had gone off during a subsequent altercation and that she hadn't meant to hurt her former partner. Nevertheless, she was eventually found guilty of murder in May of 2016 and consequently sentenced to 15 years in prison. Number 6. Sarah Williams. On January the 14th of 2016, 60-year-old Sadie Hartley was stunned with a cattle prod and stabbed over 41 times by her love rival, Sarah Williams, at her Helmshire, England home. 35-year-old Williams, along with friend and accomplice Katrina Walsh, had been plotting the vicious crime for over a year before finally committing it. She'd become obsessed with the victim's partner, Ian Johnston, a 57-year-old former firefighter, following a brief affair, and refused to accept his decision to end their involvement. The murderers had scouted Hartley's house, put a tracking device in Johnston's car, and bought burner phones, a taser, and binoculars in the months prior to the attack. Williams and Walsh waited until Johnston left for a skiing trip to the Swiss Alps to spring into action, ensuring that the victim would be alone. They knocked on Hartley's door and immobilized her with a cattle prod before unleashing what was later described as an orgy of violence. When police were called to the scene, they recovered CCTV footage showing the two culprits waiting outside the victim's residence, and would later find Walsh's diary, which described the plot to kill Hartley in detail. Upon being found guilty of murder, Williams and Walsh were sentenced to 30 and 25 years in prison, respectively. Number 5. Ryan Donellan. On August the 29th of 2016, 30-year-old Ryan Donellan brutally murdered his former partner's new boyfriend, Stephen Chadwick, also 30, after luring him into a trap in Harpuri, England. Donellan and Nicola McKeegan, aged 25, had been dating for 9 years and shared a son together. Although McKeegan ultimately decided to put an end to their relationship, she reassured the man that she would never get in between him and their child. Donellan grew increasingly agitated with their new arrangement and demanded to know if his ex was dating someone else, claiming he wanted to shake his hand. Chadwick agreed to meet with Donellan, but was stunned when he initially asked if he would look after McKeegan and the child, since they had only been dating for a short time. Chadwick subsequently attempted to leave, but Donellan pulled out a knife he'd been concealing and stabbed him 9 times. In March of 2017, the man was found guilty of murder and sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. Number 4. Whitney Franks. Between August the 17th and September the 1st of 2020, Sports Direct employee Whitney Franks attempted to hire a hitman to murder her co-worker, Ruth Rutner, via the dark web. 26-year-old Franks began devising her sinister plot after discovering that Rutner, a newcomer at the Buckinghamshire store, was also dating her boyfriend, General Manager James Prest. The latter was already involved in a serious relationship with a third woman, the mother of his 2 children, and had allegedly encouraged the rivalry between his lovers. On September the 2nd, Carl Miller, a BBC investigative journalist, uncovered Franks' request on the dark web, which contained Rutner's address as well as her physical description. Franks had offered $1,000 in cryptocurrency to carry out the murder. 8 days after Miller reported the post to the police, the suspect was arrested. During questioning, she told officers that she'd simply wanted to check if the dark web was a scam. Franks was charged with 1 count of soliciting murder and on the 22nd of September was jailed for 12 years. Number 3. Mohammed Shiraz Bashier. 41-year-old Mohammed Shiraz Bashier reportedly warned the police in Yorkshire, England, that he planned to harm his girlfriend's former lover, 34-year-old Craig Preston, days before he ultimately murdered him. On August the 21st of 2016, Bashier, accompanied by his girlfriend, 24-year-old Leonie Mason, and 3 teenage accomplices, beat Preston to a bloody pulp before discarding his lifeless body on the moors. The victim's remains were discovered the following morning. Bashier had threatened his love rival multiple times before the fatal attack and was actually detained for the threats on August the 13th, 8 days before Preston's death. He'd eventually been released due to insufficient evidence. An autopsy revealed that Preston had died as a result of a head injury sustained in the assault. Investigators discovered messages the 5 suspects had exchanged in which they detailed their murderous plan and shared pictures of the victim's body in the trunk of a car. Bashier and Mason were convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, while their 3 accomplices, whose identities weren't released to the public, were each found guilty of manslaughter. Number 2. Els Clottman's. 26-year-old schoolteacher Els Clottman sabotaged her perceived love rival's parachute during a skydiving trip in Flanders, Belgium, on November the 18th of 2006. Els Van Doren, aged 38, had become involved with fellow skydiver Marcel Summers, in whom Clottman also held a romantic interest. When Van Doren attempted to deploy her parachute mid-air, she was disengaged from her skydiving partners. Her helmet camera showed her frantically attempting to activate the reserve parachute to no avail, as the cords to both mechanisms had been cut, and she tragically plummeted to her death. Following the incident, Clottman was interviewed by the police along with the other members of the skydiving club when she received word that investigators wished to speak with her a second time. She attempted to take her own life. Detectives discovered that both women had been involved romantically with Summers, and that Clottman had had ample opportunity to sabotage her rival's parachute throughout the weekend preceding the incident. She was formally charged in January of 2007, but her trial didn't begin until 3 years later. Clottman pleaded not guilty, but was nevertheless convicted of murder on October the 22nd of 2010, after which she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Number 1. Dennis Miller. In 2020, Dennis Miller, aged 22, viciously murdered his love rival, 26-year-old Denis Gubarev, in front of the woman they'd both been competing for at Novosibirsk State University in Russia. The 18-year-old woman, identified only as Sophia K., had decided to break up with Miller 3 months prior to the deadly incident and began dating Gubarev soon after. Miller, a psychology postgraduate who worked at the university, allegedly quizzed his students on whether he should kill his rival. However, none of the students reported the alarming episode to the police. On the day of the murder, Miller and Gubarev had begun arguing in front of Sophia. Miller eventually offered to forget everything and hug it out with his rival. Gubarev refused, at which point Miller pulled him close and stabbed him to death. After the police arrived, the suspect was allegedly smiling as officers handcuffed him and openly admitted to killing Gubarev. Sophia K. was found dead in her apartment shortly after the altercation. Although the police initially suspected that she'd harmed herself, there were no signs of violence at the scene, and coroners later theorized that she'd died of a broken heart, brought on by the shock of seeing her ex murder her boyfriend.
Thanks for watching. What's your biggest red flag when meeting someone new? Let us know in the comments section below.